The morning Maya Osei walked into the lobby of Hartwell Capital Group, she had exactly $42 in her bank account, 2 children waiting for her at home, and a resume inside a clear plastic sleeve that she had ironed flat the night before with a warm towel because she did not own an iron. She was not there for a job posting. There was no job posting. She was there because 3 years earlier, she had done the books for a small accounting firm that handled some of the building's tenants, and during that time she had briefly worked alongside Sandra Reyes, the personal assistant to Daniel Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Capital Group. Sandra had been kind to Maya. She had retired 2 weeks ago due to poor health. And Maya, who had been out of work for 5 months after her own firm collapsed in a financial scandal she had nothing to do with, had simply decided to walk in and ask. She knew it was unusual. She knew it might not work. But her daughter had asked her the night before whether they would still be able to stay in their apartment, and Maya had said yes with a confidence she did not fully feel, and she was not the kind of woman who made promises she did not intend to keep. The receptionist at the front desk looked at her the way people look at someone who has arrived at the wrong party. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," Maya said. "But I would like to leave a note for Mr. Hartwell, if that's possible." The receptionist gave her a small card and a pen. Maya wrote 4 sentences. Her name. Her background. What she could do. And 1 line at the bottom, "I will not waste your time." She handed it back, thanked the receptionist, and turned to sit down in the waiting area. She did not pace. She did not check her phone every 30 seconds. She sat straight in her chair, her hands folded in her lap, and she waited. Daniel Hartwell was not supposed to come through the lobby that morning. He had been in a difficult board meeting on the 14th floor and had decided, on impulse, to take the stairs down and walk out to get coffee himself rather than ask someone to bring it. He had been surrounded by people all morning who told him what he wanted to hear, and it had left him feeling strangely hollow. He noticed Maya not because she was doing anything dramatic, but because she was doing nothing dramatic. She was simply sitting. In a room full of movement and noise, her stillness was its own kind of statement. He picked up the card from the reception desk on his way out, read it, and stopped walking. He gave her 5 minutes. She used 4. She did not beg. She did not mention her children or her empty bank account or the fact that she had taken 2 buses to get there. She simply told him what she had done, what she was good at, and what she believed she could contribute. When he asked why he should take a chance on someone who had not held a senior role in nearly 2 years, she looked at him directly and said, "Because I have had 2 years to think very carefully about what matters in a workplace, and I no longer waste energy on things that don't." He hired her that afternoon. He told himself it was an act of charity. Looking back, years later, he would admit that was not entirely true. ******. The first week was not easy. Maya's official title was executive coordinator, a role that involved managing Daniel's calendar, filtering his correspondence, and coordinating between departments. It was a job that required precision, patience, and the ability to remain invisible while seeing everything. Most people underestimated how difficult it was. Most people also underestimated Maya. The office had its own social map, its own unwritten rules, its own small kingdoms. People had been at Hartwell Capital for years and had built careful relationships with one another. Maya arrived with no alliances, no history, and no idea who could be trusted. So she did what she had always done when she entered a new environment: she watched, she listened, and she said very little. On her 4th day, while organizing Daniel's calendar for the following week, she noticed something that made her pause. 2 separate investor meetings had been scheduled back to back, a man named Gerald Voss at 2 o'clock and a woman named Patricia Lamb at 3. Maya had no reason to know that Gerald Voss and Patricia Lamb had been in a quiet but bitter dispute over a joint portfolio for the past 8 months. But she had come across a small note buried in an old email thread while organizing Daniel's inbox, and she had remembered it, the way she always remembered small things that other people let go. She rescheduled Patricia's meeting to the following morning without telling anyone why. She simply moved it and updated the calendar. A week later, Daniel found out, not from Maya, but from Gerald Voss himself, who mentioned in passing that he had heard Patricia Lamb had also been scheduled to meet with Daniel on the same afternoon and was glad that had not happened, given the current situation between them. Daniel called Maya into his office. "Did you move that meeting on purpose?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Why didn't you tell me? Because it was already taken care of, she said. I didn't want to bring you a problem I had already solved. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded and told her she could go. After she left, he sat at his desk for a long time thinking about how rare that was, someone who fixed things quietly, without needing credit for the fixing. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. 3 months passed. Then 6. Maya learned the firm the way she had always learned things, thoroughly, and from the ground up. She learned which senior managers were sharp and which were simply loud. She learned which vendors overcharged and which delivered exactly what they promised. She learned that the firm's chief financial officer, a man named Marcus Hartwell, Daniel's younger brother, had a habit of scheduling certain vendor payments late on Friday afternoons, when the accounting team was already preparing to leave for the weekend. She noticed it the first time by accident. The second time, she wrote it down. By the 5th time, she had a small, quiet file on her personal drive that she had not shared with anyone. She did not know yet what it meant. She only knew it was unusual, and that unusual things deserved attention. Meanwhile, something else was happening, slowly and without either of them planning it. Daniel had begun to rely on Maya in ways that went beyond scheduling. Before difficult meetings, he would ask her, who is going to push back in there, and why? She would tell him. She was almost always right. Before important phone calls, he would sometimes stop at her desk and ask, "What am I missing?" And she would tell him that too, plainly, without softening it, without worrying about whether the answer was what he wanted to hear. For a man who had spent years surrounded by people who agreed with everything he said, it was like finally being able to breathe. One evening, Maya stayed late to finish a quarterly report. Daniel returned to the office around 8 o'clock to pick up documents he had forgotten. He found her at her desk, her reading glasses on, a cup of cold tea beside her keyboard. They talked for almost 40 minutes. Not about work, or not entirely. About the city. About how much things had changed in 20 years. About what it felt like to build something and then watch it fall apart. He was talking about a failed business venture from his past. She understood it differently, but she understood it. She drove home that night and found her daughter still awake, doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was your day?" her daughter asked. Maya sat down beside her and said, "Good. Actually good." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The moment that changed everything came 9 months after Maya started. A junior analyst named Kevin had been sending internal financial projections to someone outside the firm. The breach was discovered when a competitor quoted figures that had not yet been made public. The damage was limited, but the message was serious. Someone inside Hartwell Capital had broken trust. Daniel needed to understand how it had happened and whether Kevin had acted alone. He did not want to bring in the legal team yet, not until he knew the full picture. He needed someone who could talk to people without making them feel interrogated. Someone who listened well and gave nothing away. He asked Maya. She was uncomfortable with it. She told him so directly. "You're asking me to have private conversations with colleagues and then report back to you," she said. "I want to make sure we both understand what that is." "I want someone I trust to talk to people," Daniel said. That's what it is. It was the first time he had used that word. Trust. She heard it clearly. She agreed, with one condition, that she would tell him everything she found, including anything that reflected badly on the firm's own management. He agreed immediately. She spent 3 days having quiet conversations. She bought coffee for people. She asked gentle questions and let the silence do the heavy work. What she discovered was not simple. Kevin had not acted out of greed. He had been pressured, carefully, indirectly, by someone above him who had their own reasons for wanting certain information to travel outside the firm. Maya brought Daniel the full picture, including the name of the senior employee involved. It was someone Daniel had personally hired 7 years ago. Someone he had trusted. He thanked her and handled it cleanly and without drama. But something had shifted in the firm. People who had barely noticed Maya before now watched her carefully when she walked through the office. She had not changed. She was exactly who she had always been. That, somehow, was what unsettled them. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The harder moment came 2 months later. Maya had spent weeks going over the pattern she had noticed in Marcus Hartwell's vendor payments. She had been careful and patient, cross-checking figures, reading old contracts, comparing dates. What she found, when she finally assembled it completely, was not something she could dismiss. Marcus had been routing small but consistent payments to vendor accounts that were connected to a separate company registered in a different name. The amounts were modest enough to avoid triggering automatic audits. The pattern, however, was unmistakable once you looked for it. Over 4 years, the total was significant. And the trail, when followed carefully, pointed toward something more serious. Marcus had been building a financial position that would allow him to approach a specific group of investors and, at the right moment, push for a leadership change at the firm, removing Daniel from his own company. Maya sat with this information for 11 days. She thought about saying nothing. She thought about leaving. She thought about what it would mean to bring this to Daniel, his brother, his family, a man he had worked beside for a decade. On the 12th day, she asked for a private meeting. She placed the documents on his desk in a neat stack. She did not tell him what to think about them. She did not frame them with emotion or opinion. She simply said, "I want you to look at these. I've been looking at them for a long time, and I believe they're accurate. I didn't want to bring you a suspicion. I waited until I was sure." Daniel did not speak for a long time. When he finally looked up, his face was very still. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough to be certain," she said. He thanked her and asked her to leave the documents with him. She walked out of his office not knowing if she still had a job. That evening she sat at the kitchen table with her daughter and told her what she had done. Her daughter asked, "How do you know it was the right thing?" Maya thought about it honestly before answering. "Because it was the hardest thing," she said. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The investigation that followed was quiet and fast. Daniel brought in an external forensic accounting team on a Friday evening and had preliminary findings by Tuesday morning. The full picture was considerably larger than even Maya's documentation had suggested. Marcus resigned within the week. A brief statement was released to the press. No further details were given publicly. The board of directors, once the situation had been contained, asked Daniel a direct question: "Who had first brought this to his attention?" "My executive coordinator," he said. There was a silence in the room. Then one of the senior board members said, "We should probably talk about what her actual role is at this company." Daniel agreed. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. He called Maya into his office on a Thursday morning and offered her a newly created position, Chief of Staff. It came with a seat at every major leadership meeting, access to all significant decisions before they were made public internally, and a salary that made her hands go briefly still when she saw the number. She asked for 24 hours. He looked surprised. He had expected her to accept immediately. She went home and sat with her daughter at the kitchen table and told her everything. Her daughter, 14 years old and very serious about things that mattered, listened carefully. Then she asked, "Do you trust him?" Maya thought about it for a real moment. Not a polite moment, but a genuine one. "I think he trusts me," she said. "And I've learned that's actually harder to find." She accepted the next morning. Before she did, she said one thing: "I will always tell you the truth. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when you don't want to hear it. That's the only way I know how to do this job." Daniel looked at her and said, "That's exactly why I'm asking you." Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The year that followed was the most demanding of Maya's professional life, and also the most meaningful. She became the quiet center of the firm's decision-making, not because she sought authority, but because people learned, over time, that she was the most reliable person in the building. She had no agenda beyond doing the work well. She did not play politics. She did not build alliances for her own benefit. She simply showed up every day and did what she said she would do. When a major acquisition deal began to fall apart publicly and the firm faced significant reputational damage, the crisis meetings were loud and anxious. Advisors recommended deflection. Board members suggested blaming external market forces. Several senior managers spent more energy managing their own appearances than addressing the actual problem. Maya walked into one of those meetings and waited until the room went quiet. Then she said, in a calm and even voice, "The deal was miscalculated. We made assumptions that were not supported by the data at the time, and the situation has changed in ways we did not predict." The right thing to do is to say that clearly, take responsibility, and tell investors what the path forward looks like. Anything else will cost us more in the long run than the deal itself. The room resisted. Several people spoke against it. Daniel listened to all of them. Then he looked at Maya and said, "We do it your way." The firm released a straightforward public statement that acknowledged the error, outlined the steps being taken, and committed to specific transparency measures going forward. The short-term response was difficult. Several investors pulled back. 3 months later, however, new investors cited the firm's handling of the situation as the primary reason they chose to work with Hartwell Capital over competitors. A business publication called it a case study in corporate integrity. Nobody mentioned Maya by name. She did not mind. *****. On a Tuesday evening in March, Maya's younger son had his first speaking role in a school play. It was a small production in a school gymnasium with paper decorations on the walls and parents crowding metal folding chairs. Maya was in the third row. Her daughter sat beside her. When the play was over and the children came out to find their families, Maya turned around and stopped. Daniel Hartwell was standing at the back of the gymnasium, still wearing his work coat, a program in his hand. He had not been invited. He had found out about it from a passing comment Maya had made to a colleague 2 weeks earlier and had simply decided to come. They spoke for a few minutes in the parking lot afterward, while her son ran circles around them, still full of the excitement of the performance. "Thank you for coming," Maya said. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said. They stood quietly for a moment. Then Daniel said, "I want you to know something. When you first walked into that lobby, I didn't hire you out of sympathy. I've told myself that story, but it isn't true. I hired you because you were the only person in that building who wasn't performing. Everyone else was trying to be impressive. You were just being honest. I hadn't seen that in a long time." Maya looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "I was 3 months away from losing my apartment when I walked in there. I almost didn't come. I thought it was too much to ask." "What made you come anyway?" he asked. She looked across the parking lot at her son, who was still spinning in circles, laughing at nothing in particular. "I made a promise," she said simply. She drove home that night with the windows down, even though it was cold. Her son fell asleep in the back seat before they left the parking lot. Her daughter looked out the window and said nothing, which was how Maya knew she understood. The apartment they had almost lost 3 years ago was the same apartment they returned to that night. It looked exactly the same from the outside. Inside, everything was different. Maya parked the car and sat for a moment before waking her son. She thought about the lobby she had walked into with $42 to her name. She thought about the plastic sleeve and the card with 4 sentences. She thought about every quiet moment when she had chosen the harder, more honest thing. She had not set out to become indispensable. She had only set out to do her job well and to tell the truth while doing it. Somewhere along the way, those 2 simple things had built something she could not have planned, a place at the table, a man who trusted her completely, and a life that was, at last, solid beneath her feet. She woke her son gently. He blinked up at her, still half asleep, and smiled the wide, uncomplicated smile of a child who has no reason to worry about tomorrow. She carried him inside. She locked the door. She made tea. And she went to sleep, for the first time in a very long time, without fear.